Pavlodar, the ancient area of the city, is built out with buildings that date back to the late 19th to early 20th centuries. It seems quite natural that the large-scale archaeological research is being carried out here today. Some 15 years ago, archaeologist Timur Smagulov founded the Margulan Center in Pavlodar. Since 2016, the scientist and his team reside in this interesting building. This is a place with history, for history, and about history. The team of the Margulan Center of Pavlodar State Pedagogical University is very well known in Kazakhstan's archaeology industry. The center has all the components for successful work. The center has well-equipped bays and made quite sensational discoveries using innovative methods. The secret developments, scientific value and uniqueness of research, international partnership, and a charismatic leader also contribute to its success. The famous Urjar priestess is one of the 8 people in golden attire found in Kazakhstan. In 2013, an expedition led by Timur Smagulov discovered an intact burial, a tightly closed stone sarcophagus in the Saki burial mound in the East Kazakhstan region. The stone was removed with the help of a crane and transported to Almaty to the laboratory of restorer Krim Altinbekov. For the first time, scientists applied an unconventional technique, X-ray of the stone. The photographs made it possible to see what was inside without opening or disturbing the fragile organic remains, which usually turn into dust under the archaeologist's brush. It turned out that there was a young woman in a dress with an ornament in the sarcophagus. The girl rested on a bed of herbs and flowers and held a fern in her hands. Today, the reconstruction of the Saki princess is on display at the Kazakh National Museum in Nur-Sultan. Timur Smagulov's team carried out many subsequent studies according to this scheme: the removal of a stone, a tomograph, an X-ray, and only then a laboratory excavation lasting for several years. The Baidali burial ground of the era of the Kimak Khaganate was found several years ago in the Pavlodar region. All its parts were delivered to the Margulan Center in separate blocks. It was quite a sensational discovery. Many fragments of silk fabric and the remains of horses were found in the central burial. There are wooden items near the burial as well. This 5-ton block was transported to the university campus. After research that consisted of tomography, scientists revealed that this was a huge cart with a residential structure on it made without nails. It was a kind of yurt on 2 wheels, an analogue of which can be seen on the pages of the Radziwill Chronicle of the 12th century. A man was buried under this carriage. People knew about this man 10 centuries after his death.
Здесь вот мы видим, что грудная часть погребения, она очень плохой.
Here we see the central part of the burial. It's in a very poor condition. The bones here are largely decayed. Then we see the remains of jewelry that was sewn on a belt buckle, and something that looks like a leather handbag.
Видим поясную пряжку, вот, и что-то похожее на кожаную сумочку.
This person was buried in a wooden structure wrapped in birch bark. There was a saddle nearby, a wooden staff, and a bowl. The contents of the purse are not yet known.
И вот такими тонкими срезами, фиксируя, опускаясь в это захоронение.
We see these thin sections. We fix them and go deeper into this burial. Recently, we were just conducting research. Then it finally became clear to us that it was necessary to develop methods and technologies to decode the tomograms. They're created for medical purposes to study living organisms, and we have to use medical software to study their archaeological sites.
Программное обеспечение для изучения археологических объектов.
According to archaeologists, it was unusual to open a burial in a suit in a comfortable office and not in the field as it was before. The method of scanning and laboratory excavations is the future of archaeology, and according to Smagulov, this method should be presented to the students in the history departments.
Сейчас мало владеть очень хорошо лопатой, совком или каким-то шпателем. скальпелем.
Now it's not enough to have a very good shovel, scoop or spatula, scalpel. You have to learn other skills, both working with a computer and working with remote sensing. It's impossible to imagine modern archaeology without satellite control data. You can hardly see expeditions where there are no quadcopters. Some 15 years ago, it seemed like an excessive dream. Today, this is the reality that we face.
Еще лет 15 назад это казалось несбыточной мечтой. Сегодня это простейшая реальность, с которой мы постоянно сталкиваемся.
In addition to the carriage and the remains of the soldiers, horses were found in the burial. Scanning showed that in addition to their bones that were found, there were also belts and plaques. By using the special programs, tomograms will also indicate the size of objects, the chemical compositions, and their location on the horse's body, which has long decayed and is mixed with other soil. After deciphering, archaeology of the 21st century continues in the laboratory. We see plaques on the screen, but in addition to these, a more interesting work awaits us.
Здесь сохранилась пыльца растений, которая попала в момент захоронения в погребение.
A plant pollen has been preserved here, which went into the grave at the time of burial. If palynologists will take it for further study, this will give an opportunity to understand what was the vegetation around the mound, and maybe even determine the time of burial through the pollen. There are remnants of horses' hairs that may be suitable to study the DNA of these animals.
Лошади, волос, которые могут быть пригодны для изучения ДНК этих животных.
The block is lined with bags of soil. This life hack was invented by restorer Krim Altenbekov. It serves as a reliable packaging material in the field. The remains of a burial structure and horsehair are in the ground. Samples cannot be sent to the laboratory for study under a stationary microscope. In this case, the scientists can use a traveling mobile microscope. The archaeologists revealed a ceremonial Kimak Kipchak bridle set in the burial ground of Baydallah and other burials. Now these items will be studied in more detail.
Здесь очень хорошо виден орнамент. Видны остатки позолоты. Сами эти бляшки декоративные, которые...
The ornament can clearly be seen here, as well as the remains of gilding. These decorative plaques attached to the bridle are made of bronze. In ancient times, when all this was sewn onto leather belts and adorned the horse, of course, all of these ornaments sparkled and attracted attention.
Лошадь. Конечно же, все это сверкало, привлекало внимание.
Ornaments are the key to the spiritual world of that era. These indicate that the territory of Eurasia has long been united by a single cultural belt. We return to our excavations. This block is taken from the part of the Baydallah mound where the robbers worked hard. Fragments of textiles in the ground have turned into shapeless scraps. Is it a suit or a burial blanket? Archaeologists have a chance to reassemble the pieces of fabric.
Корни растений и нити, они сейчас переплетены.
Plant roots and threads, they are now intertwined and you can't just take it out. It's a very delicate and complex job. It's necessary to clean the fabric and then continue the work.
Ее перемещению.
It's half the battle to find an interesting artifact. It's also important to preserve it. For this purpose, the Margulan Center has a laboratory of ancient technologies named Umay, headed by Tatiana Krupa. Now she will work on the block full of fragments of fabric decaying from antiquity.
Посмотрите, я уже вам сейчас могу сказать, это что...
Look, I can already tell you that this is plain weaved silk, most likely a detail of a suit. You can see how interesting it looks under a microscope. It's clearly visible here.
Под микроскопом хорошо его видно. Тонкий.
Tatiana Krupa is an archaeologist with 35 years of experience, a historian and restorer from Ukraine. She came at the invitation of the Margulan Center. The Umay laboratory has an international status. The laboratory cooperates with research centers in Turkey, Ukraine, Azerbaijan, and conducts conferences and internships for restorers. In archaeology, there's a global shortage of this profession. Specialized history education should be combined with the ability to work with hands, technical skills, knowledge of various sciences, and of course, experience.
На базе нашей лаборатории работает направление и по консервации металла,
There's a specialization for the preservation of metal, the preservation of bone, and the preservation of any organic matter in our laboratory. My area of expertise is textiles and wood. I'm also a specialist in the preservation of books and paper. People always ask archaeologists, have you found gold? And this question made me confused. As an archaeologist, I took part in many excavations, and we know the worth of the archaeological findings. Gold is a piece of metal. It has an art and historical value. It gives an idea about the technology of that time. The main information about the life, daily routine, and traditions of the ancient population is provided by this massive archaeological and expressive non-golden material. For example, all these dirty things then become the most beautiful ropes of the Golden Horde period. An inexpressive crumbling bone then appears to be unique buckles of the Qazaq period.
Которая стает потом пряжками уникальными кипчакского периода.
Archaeological textiles are of 1,000 years old, but after certain manipulations, Tatyana Nikolaevna can see the seams, weaving of threads, woven pattern, color, and learn a lot of information about the era. For example, the steppe people followed the Chinese fashion, and this silk was probably made in the south of modern Kazakhstan based on the technologies of the Celestial Empire. Silk, due to its chemical properties, is preserved better than other fabrics. But sometimes, thanks to the special environment, wool, cotton, and leather were found in burial grounds. Tatiana Krupa developed her own procedure of tissue resuscitation.
С этого контейнера я выкладываю на стекло, высыпаю и перебираю.
I take the items from this container, put it on the glass, pour it out, and sort through what I have. Here's a piece of cloth. If you look at it, it looks fragile. It cannot be pulled. It will crumble. There's a special solution for this. I'll throw it here now, and the fabric will be here for several hours.
Вот я его сейчас сюда кину. И он здесь несколько часов будет у меня киснуть.
The water turns brown. Iron salts absorbed from the surrounding soil come from the fabric.
Дальше я беру фрагмент этой ткани.
Then I take a fragment of this old fabric, which I kept in water for a day. I put it on a glass or on a flat surface using tweezers if the fabric is fragile, or I take it with a special brush.
Очень хрупкая, специальные кисточки тоненькие.
After the tissue has dried, the restorer works with a microscope.
Перед нами шелк.
We have plain weave silk, also sewn with silk threads with a needle back stitch, which is well known today.
Хорошо известен сегодня.
Special programs can immediately measure the thickness of the thread and measure the degree of twist in the process of research.
Но мы сегодня знаем вышивку Сюзанны.
Today we know the art of Suzanne embroidery. It looks amazing. It was used among the Uzbeks, Tajiks, Kazakhs in one form or another. And here is the Golden Horde tambour embroidery. We found the same tambour embroidery in the Golden Horde monuments in Ukraine in 2003. The diploma work of one of the students of the Pavlodar Pedagogical University serves as a symbol of the endless process of technology continuity on the wall of the Umay laboratory. This is a textile painting based on patterns restored by Tatyana Nikolaevna fabrics from the Bolganana mausoleum. After restoration and conservation, all the finds are delivered to the museum, but first, a thorough description will be carried out at the Margulan Center. In turn, Milana Lutsik creates an exact copy of the mirror found in 2020 on paper. The head of the Laboratory of Experimental Archaeology, Yelena Tusheva, is in charge of the process. The collection inventory is the number of the findings, material, size, weight, technological characteristics, and the degree of preservation. Yelena Tusheva graduated from Pavlodar University as a specialist in ancient history and primitive society. She has 18 years of professional experience. She was also a postgraduate student at Altai University. The study of production technology from horn to metal, from the Stone Age to the Kazakh Khanate is her greatest passion. Traceology is a science that follows the footsteps on objects and study about their functions.
Ну вот смотрите, вот один камень.
We have one stone and another stone. Technologically, they are made in the same way, but their function was different. This is a fragment of an arrowhead, and this is a large side scraper.
Наконечника стрелы. А вот это большое боковое скребло. Скребло использовалось, скорее всего, для выделки шкур, но могло использоваться для...
The scraper was most likely used for dressing skins, but it could also be used for cutting wood or meat. Micro traces, polishes, and other production markers remain on any stone. Based on these traces, one can determine what was done with the stone.
Можно определить, что именно этим камнем делали.
The fund has a collection of pots. Here's the line of dishes for the last 3,000 years. The pots of the Andronov culture tell the story about how the people of that distant era lived and what they thought about.
Символика вообще сосуда, она связывается с вместилищем. Это вместилище.
The symbol of the jar is associated with its content, and we perceive it in this way. The ancients perceived it in this way. This is the epicenter. A swastika symbol, an ancient religious icon in the cultures of Eurasia, was often drawn at the bottom. It is a symbol of the sun, the universe.
Мне рисовали символ свастики. Это символ солнца. Мироздание.
This form will then be reflected in the yurt, the nomadic dwelling, and a shanirak will replace the swastika symbol. In 2017, the Margulan Center examined a complex of more than 60 burials in the Kempirtas tract in the Bayanaul National Reserve in the Pavlodar region.
Медицины как таковой нет. Смертность детская была очень.
This dates back approximately to the 15th century BC. There was no medicine and healthcare services. Infant mortality was very high. But these people, among other things, worried about their children who passed away and went into another world to their ancestors. They put pots in the small children's as burials, and we also found an ochre, a national clay earth pigment, in the burials.
Сосудики. И в погребении мы зафиксировали внизу охру.
Pots of porridge were placed in the grave for children, and ochre, as an imitation of fire, was supposed to make the food warm. The children were buried close to their relatives in order not to be alone. Each find is a macro and micro history. Archaeologists are constantly improving in their profession. Each time they use new methods of research. We are in the office of geodetic equipment.
Замеры.
Measurements, various calculations for building maps for scaling were used, and it was necessary to build orthomosaics.
Глобальная навигационная спутниковая система, которая опирается и...
The global navigation satellite system that relies on and makes our reports using GLONASS and GPS. The electronic tachyometer is an electronic geodetic device that helps to calculate horizontal and vertical distances.
Вычислять горизонтальные и вертикальные расстояния.
The instruments are renewed here annually. The new archaeologists are still not used with this technique. Yergazi graduated from the Topographic College of Geodesy and Cartography. He's an aerial geodesist technician. His colleague, Vladislav, is engaged in applied geodesy. Both of them are studying to be historians, and they plan to be involved in archaeology in the future. Yergazi is engaged in the creation of 3D models of objects.
Вокруг кургана снять видео.
We fly around the mound, shoot a video, then crop this video literally every second or even less, so that the longitudinal transverse overlap is more than 99%. This gives precise detail. Furthermore, these images are superimposed on each other, and in general, a complete picture is created. As a result, we have a 3D model. Actually, on the screen, you can see the very 3D model that was assembled in our Bayanaul district.
В Баянаульском районе.
The team finished examining the Kempirtas burial ground, and the reclamation works were conducted at the excavations. The archaeologists continue to work with its digital copy. The Margulan Center also has the Archaeological Reconstruction Laboratory. This is the world of historical weapons. Here you can see a real kimak saber, 1,000 years old and armor restored from the finds. There are communities of restorers, enthusiasts, and amateurs in Kazakhstan and Pavlodar, but for the first time, a whole scientific laboratory has been opened. These plates are an exact copy of those found during excavations in the Pavlodar region. There are about 600 plates in armor. This is a painstaking work which lasted probably 3 months. The armor is perfect for riding. Its total weight is not more than 30 kilograms. The steppe knight, unlike the European one, could put them on himself. This type of armor was used by nomads from the 9th to the 14th century. Alibek Kabildinov made 5 sets over the 4 years at the laboratory. Have your armor been tested for sword strike, bow shot? No, I always wanted, but after you do everything, I don't want to destroy or break it. Is it a bit bigger?
Вот.
Тяжело?
Is it heavy? No, there were even heavier stuff in my life.
Тяжелее.
Ну вот примерно так.
Well, this is how the steppe warrior looked like in the period from 9 to 10th centuries in all his full military attire with spear, sword, armor, and helmet. It seems to me that you need to leave the laboratory for the study of ancient technologies in this attire. Now we're going to the research base of the center. Баянауыл. This is a unique place for those who love archaeology. In a short period, literally in half a day, you can plunge into the history of all those people who have ever lived in this territory. Do you want to be in a stone age? Welcome to the mountains. There are petroglyphs here. There are burial places from the Bronze Age here. There are also Saka burial mounds, medieval monuments, and of course Qazaq wintering settlements of the 18th to 19th centuries. Kazakh wintering settlements have become a new direction of the Margulan Center. Moreover, wintering settlements have not been studied previously in the region, and it all started with a photograph of Dmitry Bagayev in 1930 from the archives of the region where the ruins were visible. And he signed that this was the wintering of Sultan Mahmud Toraygirov's grandfather. This image captures the landscape well. It was this rock along which we precisely determined the location of this object. First, the written sources of the early 20th century were examined, and indeed, there was a village near Mount Akbet. Clearing works were initiated. The archaeologists have just started to learn the history of wintering. It's important to find out the types of buildings, how many people lived, and what their life was like. The main goal is to museumify the object for scientific and tourist purposes, and to create a model of the reconstructed ethnographic settlement of the Kazakhs in the Баянауыл. The research base of the center is located next to the cult complex of the Sakas of the 1st millennium BC. Steels with solar symbols and barrows attract tourists and school children who are interested in history. However, the excavation does not always look like a summer sightseeing tour. Let's move 500 kilometers north and 2 months ahead to the border of Pavlodar and North Kazakhstan regions. The excavation at Kiziloba is a long-anticipated dream for the head of the expedition, Timur Smagulov. When he was a student, he first learned that there are mysterious ruins, the remains of irrigation and bridges in the valley of the Seleta River. He read about these facts in the publications of Alki Margulan. In 2003, being an experienced archaeologist, Timur Smagulov came here to explore the history of the region. Local people said that there is a place called Kiziloba, 8 kilometers from the village, dotted with burned bricks. Scientists then discovered a large bomb with ceramics on the surface. Medieval mausoleums can be found in western, central, and southern Kazakhstan. But in the history of northern Kazakhstan, the period of the Golden Horde is shrouded in mystery. The notes about this territory appeared in the written sources at the end of the 16th century. The historical gap begins in the Kimak Kipchak period and lasts until the stage of the formation of the Kazakh Khanate. Timur Smagulov has been exploring his native region all his life. He discovered the Kolbasun Tower in the Yertis region and mausoleums near Lake Aulikol. He mapped a dozen new monuments and concluded that 700 years ago, an unexplored center of the Golden Horde civilization existed on the territory of northeastern Kazakhstan. And it seems that the findings at Kiziloba prove this fact. Excavations began here in 2019 as part of the 750th anniversary of the Golden Horde. The Margulan Center of Pavlodar State Pedagogical University, together with colleagues from the Kozybayev University of North Kazakhstan, discovered the first burial at the end of the first season. This is a classic mausoleum of the Golden Horde era, as it has a square shape.
В плане он имеет квадратную форму.
It has very thick walls, laid out thoroughly of square bricks with a format of 22 by 22, 25 by 25 centimeters. This is the so-called Golden Horde format, a feature characteristic of the mausoleums of the Golden Horde, built in the 14th to 15th centuries from the Danube almost to the Yertis region.
как показывает, вот практически до Приртышья.
The mausoleum stood on a brick platform, a stylobate laid out in 3 layers on top of a hill. The ancient architects chose a point with a good exposure. Satellite images clearly show the ditch around it. It had a drainage function which eliminated moisture from the building. Due to this, the walls were preserved.
Сами кирпичи представляют большой интерес и для тех, кто занимается историей строительного дела.
The bricks are of great interest both for those who are engaged in the history of the construction business and archaeologists. Well, for example, here we see fingerprints of people who lived in the 14th century. They made it with their fingers, did ribbing so that the binder solution was well fixed there.
Такое вот рифление для того, чтобы связующий раствор хорошо там фиксировался.
The building was erected in classical architectural tradition, characteristic of the Muslim monuments of the nomadic elite of Central Asia. In the center of the mausoleum, 4 graves have been found since the beginning of excavations. In the first, the ancient masonry was disturbed several decades ago. Topographers, while installing a trigger point, drill a hole through the crypt. Archaeologists have found a gold earring and garment decorations in the grave. The neighboring burials are intact, and the scientists revealed silver coins minted in the golden hoard and a silver mirror. It looks like the front part of the building was crowned, but there was no entrance to the mound. The family tomb was probably covered with a forged lattice in a lancet niche. Alas, we can only guess about the full appearance of the structure.
В 18-19 веке, когда отсюда ушли джунгары,
In the 18th to 19th century, when the Jungars left and the Kazakhs of the Middle Jus, a tribal division came, this building was already in a ruined state, and the people do not remember what it was. And for household needs, people took bricks from here, and we just see such holes in those places where brick was removed from the masonry of an ancient structure.
сейчас мы и видим вот такие вот пустоты.
The mausoleum was 20 meters above the step. Hundreds of people worked at the construction site. They mined clay from the quarry, prepared mortar, formed bricks. The roasting complex was also discovered. It feels that the building served as a landmark in the steppe and was a sacred cult object. The 14th century is the period when Islam became the main religion of the Great Steppe. This fact raises more questions about the discovery in a noble burial. Probably Chingizids were buried judging by personal items. By the way, Timur Smagulov also discovered objects characteristics of the pre-Islamic tradition, coins, combs, ornaments, and other mausoleum in the Yertis region.
Если в Кимако-Кыпчакское время в погребениях
Horses or symbolic horse burials are usually found in burials that belongs to the Kimak-Kipchak period. In the Golden Horde era, there was no horse in the funeral traditions, but the symbols of equestrianism remain. The call of the horse changes over time in the funeral rite, and the further Islam penetrates, the less various objects become, of course, but they remain. This is a sign of the nomads of the Golden Horde.
характерны для кочевников Золотой Орды.
Tatiana Krupa examines the finds in the field laboratory. The earring, in her opinion, has no gender. The anthropological analysis will show who owns this earring, but it's obvious that the item is of the highest quality. The inserts are presumably pearls, although they are rarely stored for more than 300 years, and glass from Asia Minor. Earrings of this shape have been known since the first centuries of our era and have been in fashion for a long time. Tatiana Nikolaevna studies both the mortar and the composition of the brick. After all, the monument will be preserved and restored and turned into an open-air museum. The mausoleum is interesting not only as a ritual monument. Many sakyas, a water-lifting device in the form of a wheel with buckets, were found around.
Крепились на водоподъемное колесо, колесо вращалось.
These are special pots that were attached to a water-lifting wheel. The wheel rotated, and sakya cooped up water, and then the water was directed through special grooves to other reservoirs. This water was used for irrigation and to prepare the molding mass for the brick preparation. And sakya is just a marker that shows the level of development of culture and economy of that time.
Экономики того времени.
The aerial photography showed the presence of an irrigation system in the valley, which says that irrigated agriculture was carried out here in the area of the Golden Horde. It's necessary to know what crops were planted. There are copper and gold deposits in the vicinity of Kiziloba. Timur Smagulov suggests that the location of the nomadic headquarters and sacred centers in the valley of the Seleta River is associated with the need to control gold deposits. Archaeologists create an accurate 3D model of the monument with reference to geopoints with the help of digital technologies and the latest equipment. This allows non-stop research in the wintertime to cooperate with the best specialists as they can study the mausoleum in detail without coming to the excavation. According to Timur Smagulov, works at the Kiziloba area are of great interest for many generations of researchers. A medieval monument is not a single-step mausoleum. Its structures is only a part of a large-scale complex that will become a new page in the national history, associated with the formation of statehood in the era of the Golden Horde.